Welcome to the PortlyAI Human Capital Squad Talk podcast, where we engage in conversations about the changing business landscape and how human capital and other C-suite leaders are approaching this. I'm Susan Gans, and I'm your host. I'm the Human Capital Squad leader for PortlyAI and also a business strategist with Gans Strategic Solutions. Today, I am very excited to introduce you to Matt Konwiser. A little bit about Matt. He is a technology wanderer. He learns and shares and does what he can to stay ahead of things. He cares very deeply about governance and ethics and making sure that people stay connected to the world, even with the sprawl of technology. He is also a tinkerer and a builder, as you can see by his background. And if he can't understand something, if he hasn't used it. Welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So let's start off the conversation by talking about the fact that here we are, we're moving to a more project based economy and skills based workforce. So, what does that mean for you as a leader and for your organization? What are you seeing and doing to keep up with this crazy pace of change?
I think this is probably one of the biggest change agents that we're seeing in organizations right now because if you if you think about it, it used to be very task based, right? So when
Yes.
you hired somebody for a role, you had a job description, and the job description wasn't really about a single motion or a single project. It was you're going to look at this check and take the routing number, the account number, the dollar amount, and the person's name and put them into the system. And you're going to do that every single day, every single minute until you leave the company. And we are automating a lot of those types of tasks at a record pace, not even just because of generative AI, but pre-AI, right? Just using systems and tools.
Yes.
So we're now looking for people with an entirely different skill set, and we are putting humans to work in a new way. And this new way, as you said, was project based. So I think it's important to understand what that means. A project is not necessarily a point in time thing like a project manager would work on. A project is your job in your role in this company is to keep our marketing campaigns moving. That's your project. So it's not a single marketing campaign, it's not a single element of a campaign, but it's the overall campaign. So the skills that are becoming increasingly critical are generalist knowledge, critical thinking, and creativity.
Yes.
And the reason why those are so important, and I'll explain each, the generalist knowledge is so important because we are able to use generative AI now to fill in a lot of blanks.
Yes.
So I don't need to know how to do deep Python coding, but I need to know when I need to use Python. And then I can use a generative AI system to help me create the code. So, as a generalist, the more I know about all of the different areas around my project, my what I was hired to do skill set, the more I can invoke lots of different agents and lots of different generative systems to do all of this work, but I still have to know what all those different things are. So the generalist thing is very important. Critical thinking ties directly into that as the second point, because without critical thinking, I'm not going to ask myself, well, what can I do more, better, different? What can I do to expand the scope beyond what might normally be considered? How do I come up with creative concepts to get things done? And how do I motivate the tools and the people around me to do things differently and to think differently?
Yes.
And you can't do that without creative thinking um, or critical thinking. And then the last piece is creativity. And that's just simply what can I do that's never been done before? And is there a way I can do it that has never been thought of? and looking for all of those things together, that's how we get this incredibly powerful individual human being. You have somebody that's versed in lots of different topics, that can think very critically about all of the problems they're trying to solve, and they've got the creativity to look at things in a different way and then apply the other two things to come up with something entirely new. And if you think about it, that combination of three will keep
Yes.
somebody employed for a very long time, because they will never get caught up behind AI. They will always stay in front of it, and they will always stay in front of their peers. So that's those are the skills that are really required in people, and those are the ways that people stay ahead of all of these changing business dynamics and ahead of AI and survive in this more project-based economy and workforce.
I love what you're saying here. My question, follow-up question for you on this is you talked about motivation. So how do you motivate people? Because some people are white knuckling and resisting. And so how do you help them to see this vision that you've so beautifully outlined with the three core skill sets?
So, have you ever ridden a roller coaster?
Yes,
Okay. Um, have you ever been nervous about riding a roller coaster?
absolutely.
Okay, but you do it anyway.
Yes.
Why?
um, because there's a thrill and anticipation, and then on the other side, when you get over that hump, it feels fantastic.
That's how we have to motivate people, right? I mean, AI is scary. It can do some really scary things. And again, as you mentioned in my introduction, I'm very passionate about ethics and governance. AI overlapping ethics and governance happens a lot in some very scary ways. But that doesn't mean that I'm sitting on the sidelines and thinking, oh no, that's terrible, that's horrible, it's nobody should use that, it's awful, because that's not true. So the motivation is a combination of two things. Number one, it's a workplace that encourages exploration and failure. And number two, it's looking for people that have that innate desire to just be afraid and get in the roller coaster anyway, because they know that the odds are, between the systems designs and the inspections and the employees that are trained on it and everything about roller coasters, you're going to get back off of that thing 3 minutes later. And even if you didn't love it, you now have the experience of having ridden it, and you're more apt to ride another one, maybe not the same one, but
Yes.
something different. But those are the motivators, is because if you find somebody with the desire to get on a coaster, then it's easy to motivate them in an environment where it's okay to fail and you actually want people to fail. I had somebody work with me a while ago, and she was an absolute project management genius, like, Six Sigma, Jack Welch type
Yes.
prodigy person. But as an offer manager, as a program manager and a Six Sigma black belt, failure wasn't really something that she was comfortable with, because the whole point of all of that is you don't fail. You plan, you pivot, you plan, you pivot, you plan, you pivot. And I actually put in her goals for 1 year that you have to fail at something. Like you, and I
Okay.
wrote this down, and quite literally, she wouldn't get her full bonus if she didn't fail at something. So she said to me, "Well, how do I fail at something?" I said, "You have to come up with something that you know to be impossible to do and try it anyway." And we were able to figure out some pretty incredible things that she knew she could never possibly do, but she tried it anyway, and it didn't work out. So she succeeded at failing, which is kind of funny because technically that failed the checkpoint because she succeeded at failing. But don't worry, she got well paid that year.
Okay.
Everything's fine, just in case anybody's wondering. Um, but those are the types of properties that really matter to people and matter to employers. Is if you're walking into a dark room, you just stick your hand out and feel around and figure it out until you can find the light switch. And that's it. But it's really important that people encourage that behavior because that creates the motivation as long as you can find the people that are willing to ride the coasters. You put those two together, you're in really good shape.
So I appreciate the analogy very much, and it takes me back to my technology project management days where I took on a project that had failed 8 times prior to me getting involved, and I invited all the stakeholders to come on a roller coaster ride with me. That we're gonna have highs and lows, and just embrace that project. And P.S. It was successful, so I
Awesome.
I appreciate um putting it out there that and being transparent. Like, we learn from these situations. um so speaking of that, what additional lessons have you learned through this sort of change and transformation journey that you've been on, and what guidance and lessons would you share with our audience?
Yeah. So this is an important one because I think it ties very closely to the other discussion we just had. Um, the biggest lesson is that even when you're being measured heavily on a performance-based metric, like in a sales organization, you still have to leave room for failure. Because if you're looking for growth and not steady state, the way you're going to get growth is by trying new things or trying more aggressive things or trying different things. And if it's not okay to fail, people are less likely to go outside of what is a preformed norm because it's like, okay, if I can get to 80% of my achievement by just doing what everybody before me kept doing, then I'm just going to keep doing that because it's better than either going for a 200% or ending up with 50%. And if you create an environment that says, okay, as an individual with my own KPIs, one of the KPIs is maybe you didn't hit your target, but you tried 5 new things that could have gotten you to double your target. And that's just as valuable. So that having that is really important as a fallback for people.
Yes.
Um, the challenge is in a sales organization, you still have to keep the lights on.
Yes.
So it's been a challenge, not only as a leader of these types of organizations, but also as somebody that had to carry a quota and carry my own bag at time to time. It is always a challenge figuring out how do you push and how do you also maintain steady state at the same time. And the answer is diversity. Um, Either where you push is not where you're driving steady state by company, by brand, by business, by opportunity, or you have to turn the push into a hobby.
Mm.
So outside of your day job, you have to figure out where to learn and how to push. And inside your day job, the focus is to maintain the steady state to keep the lights on. And that's a personal challenge. Um,
Yes.
the other personal challenge, frankly, has been bias because a lot of times you end up in a very delicate situation where people type you or they listen to something you say or something you write and they interpret it a certain kind of way because of their bias or because of my
Yes.
own that I didn't realize until I read it and read somebody else's feedback on what I created. And you have to be willing to admit that you're wrong and accept the feedback and decide that your mind isn't the only right version of things and change. And as a funny anecdote, I've gotten at least 10 people through LinkedIn that have connected to me where we've started dialogues because I wrote something and they wrote a really aggressive negative response to my post. And my response to them had been, I never looked at it that way before. That's a really good point. I really appreciate the input. What do you think about this kind of an angle, and how would you do it differently? And their response, all of them, was, I apologize for being so aggressive. I just wasn't expecting a civil discourse.
Mm,
Like, people are so conditioned to defend everything
yes.
that people just get kind of more aggressive to begin with, and it's disarming. And then each one of those people sent me an immediate friend request with a note saying, "Hey, it's great to connect. Thank you for being so open to actually having an open mind." Right. So, I mean, like, these are things that are really important. And I think also a lot of that is things I wish I had known before, or
Mm,
not known, because I think a lot of it is common sense, but be more conscious of, right? Actively
yes.
remind yourself that you don't always have to be right, but that everybody else, even people who are authors and noted scholars in certain topics, they don't have it right either. And the only difference between them and you is that they're willing to stand up and take a risk and share their ideas and opinions, and you're not. So, again, I think the people that are willing to take that risk are the ones who will continue to stay ahead of the curve, even if not all of the things they say are accurate. As long as they were said with good intent and in an ethical way, and they're willing to change those points of view, or you're willing to change your point of view, you'll be better for it.
Absolutely. So I really appreciate and heartwarmed by your humility and your openness to have this civil discourse, because I think we're missing a lot of that in today's society. So I'm very encouraged that you invite that, and I think that'll make a difference in the world. So
You
thank
have
you.
to. I mean, we all have to, right? I mean, it's hard. It's like one of the hardest things you can do
Yes. When
is change
somebody's
your mind
coming
about
at
something.
you,
Believe me. Yeah. But
yeah, you can take it so personally, but it's when you take the emotion out of it and say, well, wait a second, if I open my mind, what are they trying to communicate here? And bring in your curiosity. I had a coach who used to say, be curious without judgment. And so I think that's what you're trying to advocate us doing.
I like that a lot. I hadn't heard it put that way, but yes, that is a good way to say it.
So I think you've mentioned some of these skill sets already, but what skill sets would you say are needed to navigate through um, these transformational times?
So I will not repeat myself, because to your point, I did cover a lot of this, and a lot of these questions are very similar, right? For a good reason, we're telling a story, and a story should be coherent. So I'll add something that I haven't talked about yet. Everybody should have a startup mindset,
Mm,
and it goes with being a generalist, but I didn't make the point quite that way yet. And so the example I'll use is, if I'm hosting a meeting in one of our offices,
yes.
I don't care what title I have. I don't care how many people report to me. I don't care how high up I am in the organization. I'm the first person walking to the bagel shop to go get bagels and coffee for everybody. And I'm the one that's
Oh,
going to the cafeteria and grabbing the napkins and the forks to put them all out and make sure everybody's got food. At the end of the day, I'm the one that's sweeping the floors and cleaning up the tables and erasing the whiteboards. Not always, but those are the things that are on my mind, because for me, a startup mindset is, if the floor is dirty, you need to clean it. Everybody's responsible for everything. There are no boxes. There's no secular activity. There's no silos. And I think that that does play into being a generalist. That does play into being a critical thinker to some degree. But the reason why that skill set is so important through change and transformation is, as companies change, as the industry changes, the world changes, your role, your projects are going to change. And so what you did in one version of a role, even if your title doesn't change, might be different from what you do next in that role. And the more willing you are to just see a need, fill a need, to actually, yes, that is a quote from the movie Robots. But um, if you have that mindset,
Yes.
you'll survive, and not just survive, you'll thrive, and you will adapt to change and transformation really easily because you'll always have been of the mindset of, if something needs to get done, I'm just going to do it. And so if somebody says, hey, we're reorganizing, we're realigning, we're infusing AI, we're going to change how we build these programs, we're going to change what we do around these programs, you're going to think, okay, cool, where's the next broom that I need to pick up? So plain and simple, just have that kind of startup mindset through all this.
Yes, I so appreciate what you're saying because, having come out of a private equity owned company, you just you do whatever you need to do because you don't necessarily have a lot of resource. So it um, inspires one to become very creative and say, okay, I have this gap. How can I creatively fill it? And how can I do it in a way that is quality and may not cost a lot of money to do it? So it really forces those creative juices, which again go back to a very human skill,
Hmm.
creativity.
Absolutely.
So, as you know, going through any kind of change or transition comes with challenges. So, how do you personally take care of yourself and ground yourself?
This has probably been the hardest thing for me, and I'm still getting there because I will develop a swift and sometimes severe emotional reaction to things.
Mm,
And I need to identify that and calm it before it becomes a problem. And most of the time I'm able to do it, but not always. The best way to ground myself for me is to just keep reading and researching. So I'll give you a great example. There
yeah.
was a report that was published, I think, either entirely or in cooperation with the University of Washington. That's the state, not the district, by the way. And it was in, I think it was 2023 or early 2024, and it had said that the half-life of education in computer science, data science was calculated to be around 90 days. So that was 2 years ago ish, maybe a little more. And so just in case you didn't study chemistry and you're not familiar with half-lives, basically what that means is that if you walk in the door on September 1st, 90 days later, so that would be around November 1st, half of what you learned on September 1st is already invalid. Now, think about what that means for academics and people that sit on their institutional knowledge and their degrees and the things that they were known for, the book that they wrote, the paper they published, the project that they did. If you think about all of the people that sit on and base their resume and their reputation on those things alone, and you look at the half-life of knowledge, of content. And by the way, again, 90 days was 2 years ago. It may be less now. It
Yes.
probably is. Um, that's a major problem. So the way I ground myself is I assume when I wake up every morning that everything I learned in the past day may not be accurate anymore.
Yeah,
And I've seen
definitely.
that. Like I've revisited some of the papers I've written and the posts I've made and the talks I've given, even in just the past 3 years in the evolution of AI. And I look back on some of it from years ago and I think, well, that's wrong now. Like 2, 3 years ago, I was like, so what do I do? Do I print a retraction or do I leave it out there? And the answer is I leave it. I don't print a retraction. There's two reasons for it. Number one, because it's all time dated.
Right.
And number two, we're allowed to change our minds, but we
Yeah.
have to admit that. right? So that's the other thing is the way I ground myself is to very publicly admit that I was wrong or that something I said before is not the same as it is now. And you have to be willing to just own that. And it makes you very, very humble because you become more appreciative of just how much knowledge there is out there. Um, and I also look at people in the public eye that represent themselves as experts in a lot of different things. And I look at how much of their information is incorrect.
Mm.
It may not have been incorrect at the time where they formulated that opinion, but by the time they publish that knowledge or produce that content or share it, it becomes painfully obvious that things changed and they didn't.
Yeah.
And that's the other way I ground myself is I compare the way I think and the way I produce knowledge and the way I teach and talk to those types of people. And I make sure that I'm not kind of aligning to their strategy. And it keeps me out of the spotlight a lot more because I'm not producing major works or anything, but it also keeps me far more current for things like podcasts and client conversations and quick meetings because I'm never fixated on a point in time. I'm always looking at what happened today compared to
Yes.
yesterday. And that is the only way, in my opinion, to ground yourself in this world.
Yes, I think it is recognizing that change exists and what we know today might not be what we know tomorrow, or it's a different world. But it does take reorientation, because we haven't been taught this in formal settings.
Hmm.
We've learned it over time, or some people have embraced it and learned it.
That's right.
So, Matt, just switching gears a bit, what's something in your background that we might be surprised to learn about that has informed the way you look at transformation?
So I'm glad you asked me that. It's a great question. Um, I have a very interesting background. So I've done a lot of things. I've been to school for marketing, computer science, engineering, physics, and psychology. I have worked for a state. I've worked for schools, and I've worked for manufacturers, and I've done marketing, architecture, technology, leadership, project management, services, industry, teaming, lots of different things. I've also studied to be an auxiliary police officer like 30 years ago. I used to
Wow.
build houses, model rocketry, Legos, video gaming, um, big into cycling. I was an avid road cyclist for a
Wow.
long time. And, you know, I think, again, going back to what I said in the beginning, being a generalist is one of the most important traits. The fact that I have done all of these things helped me a lot. But what opened my eyes to why all of that is so valuable is when I was at Nortel, I worked for a gentleman who I have so much respect for, I can't even express it. And unfortunately, he passed away actually, maybe just around 10 years ago, a little more.
Oh,
And he was an executive at Apple in marketing when the iPod launched originally. He moved
yes.
over to Nortel as the chief marketing officer. His name was Clint Richardson, and he had uh, he was an art collector. He had a vineyard. Um, he was involved in all sorts of different philanthropic and individual activities, and he always took time to mentor people. Um, the first time I met him, he I had driven up to Massachusetts to do a press junket for a new capability, and I was going to be the person that presented the technology element, and he was going to deliver the corporate kind of marketing wrapper. Didn't know who he was, didn't know his name, walked into this room at a dinner the night before it. Everybody was sitting in a circle, and he introduced himself as corporate security. And we were talking for a while. And then he started to ask me some questions about the technology that just didn't seem in line with somebody in corporate security. So I asked him, and I remember saying this very clearly. I said, "So, what did you say your role was again?" And he laughs and he pulls out a business card and it said Clint Richardson, Chief Marketing Officer, Nortel. And I laughed and I said, okay. I said I knew that there was something there. And he stayed behind and actually had a second dinner with me, just him and I,
Oh,
for a
wow.
good hour and a half that evening. And we just talked. And what he saw in me was an ability to communicate to people and at a business level, but also the ability to understand technology in a very deep way and then create a bridge between those two things.
Yes.
So I can become a propeller head, but I don't have to be a propeller head when I talk to a CEO or a board member.
Right.
But I understand it well enough that I can translate it in a way that it communicates. And he had, at the time anyway, a single bachelor's degree in psychology, not marketing, not communications, not technology, not data science, just psychology. And he told me that the reason why he valued that so much was because if you can understand how human beings think and react, then you can pretty much do anything. Um, and so I think that time in marketing with him, because he actually ended up hiring me for his team as the liaison between the technology units and the marketing unit to help the marketing teams better understand what we were building and why it was relevant and where we were strong and where we were weak and where we were equivalent and what we needed to do. Um, it changed everything. And I only did that for a short time, but the impact it had on my communication skills and the way I look at technology and the way I build presentations and everything else I've done since. And that was like 2005, 2006. So this was 20 years ago now. It has changed everything. And I've been in deep technical roles since then. And I still have people ask me, like, why do you build presentations like this? Like, how do you do it? And it's like, because I worked in marketing for a guy that worked in marketing at Apple and has a brilliant mind and was incredibly diverse and instilled those traits in me. And uh, one of his people, Tony Lee, who I am still in contact with and still consider a friend and mentor, who worked with Clint at Apple and a few other places as well, has continued to be a mentor of mine and continues to reinforce those same traits in me. So, I mean, that's something that I think a lot of people be surprised about because as a deep technologist, why would I have a marketing background? Why would I have studied psychology? Like, how does that make sense? And it does to me. And it does to me because I met somebody that created a connection in my head that just stuck. And I try and now impart that to other people when I talk to them and get them to understand the importance of not just knowing something, but being able to communicate that thing. So I think between all the different things I've done and that very specific story about some very important mentors to me, Clint and Tony, and the background in marketing, I think that's something that most people wouldn't guess.
Absolutely. And I'm particularly smiling because you're talking to somebody who is a clinical psychology major undergrad. So I connect on that front, and that liaison piece between business and technology is something that my boss, when he hired me for technology, having had no technology background, similarly saw in me. So I also relate to that. So I think there's a few messages here for our audience around that. Is you never know who a mentor might be. So having an open mind to different people and different perspectives, and you said that had such a profound impact on your career. And
Mhm.
I would say The other piece is to use your different experiences, whether it be in the workplace or your hobbies, and what is it that's transferable that can be utilized in the workplace setting. So so as we conclude our discussion, what is it that you would like our audience to remember about what we talked about today?
So, I mean, I think the most important thing is just be flexible, keep learning. Don't put too much stock in what people are evangelizing and soapboxing about. Listen to it all because there's truth in all of it. And there's a lot of experience that comes from what everybody says, myself included, but it's not the final word because things are changing so rapidly that nobody can possibly stay on top of it all. So it's just always better to do your own homework and do your own research and choose something that matters to you and keep pulling that thread. That's the most important single thing we could all be doing right now.
Well said. I so appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today. I want to reiterate some of the things that I learned is to remind people about our very human skills. So Matt outlined what is really truly meant by being a generalist and keeping your mind open to diverse perspectives. He opened our minds about creativity and critical thinking. So I'd like to reiterate that. And then finding those ways to keep yourself grounded um during this fast-paced time. So appreciate that. And so how can you find Matt? You can find him on LinkedIn under Matt Konwiser. So that's Matt, and Konwiser Konwiser.
Mhm.
So to find out more information about Portly AI and the Squad Talk, please visit portly.ai. And in the squad spirit, keep growing and evolving and leading the way. Thanks again, Matt.
My pleasure. Thank you.